So every single year, we handle hundreds, if not thousands of watches and review them, cover them to some capacity, and just spend some extended period of time with them. So what I want to do again this year for 2023 is look at some of the most notable top watches for 2023 that we've covered on this channel. So how we have this broken down is in different categories, so like GMT watches, diver watches, dress watches, chronographs, and much more. And we're gonna go through each one of those different sections with a variety of price points being represented, usually a low, medium, high where it is appropriate whenever I can. But all of these watches are based on my experience with them, looking at them on our channels, on social media, and I had to have spent time with them. This is not intended to be watches that were released in the industry in 2023. These are watches that I had spent more time with, covered on the channel, and we're just recapping and giving out some key highlights throughout the year. So we'll go through those different categories. We'll also go through some of the controversial watches released this year. And then we'll, at the end, go through some of my just personal favorite watches. So just more to my own subjective taste. So that is the general premise for this video. And also, if you have not heard yet, we are going to be doing a $5,000 watch shopping spree giveaway to one of you that watch this channel. If you want to participate, head to the link down below in the description to our website to fill out a form. On that form, submit watches you would pick if you were the winner from our store. Those have to be pasted links from our store. So take those links, put them in each individual fields, and then submit. Following your submission of that form, you then will receive an email to your email address that you will need to verify. Each individual is only eligible for one entry, and the giveaway is available to US participants only. The winner will be announced in late February of 2024 publicly on our social channels, but also will be contacted via email at an @teddybaldassarre.com email address, as well as contacted by phone. Do not respond to anybody that is not from a verified account from us. You will receive an email from an @teddybaldassarre.com email, so look for that domain. You will not receive any comment down below in any video about how you're the winner. We also would never ask for your bank or credit card information for this giveaway, so please just look out for yourself, and best of luck to all that participate. So I'm gonna be going through these watches pretty quickly because we have a lot to go through, but the first category is most unique. And this is a category that is more about a watch that's doing something extraordinary or different for its price, as well as maybe just being so unique and trailblazing in an area. The first one I have to recommend on the low end, and this was a watch that got a lot of people talking. I thought it was just a phenomenal watch for what it is. It's weird, it's quirky. This is the Seiko Metronome. This is a watch for $200, which I think adds to its coolness factor because you don't need to spend a ton of money to get into a watch like this. It has a hand that can be activated to turn into a metronome. You are able to change the different tempos to go to a blistering pace, to a very slow pace. You have a sound on and off switch. This is just a cool watch for $200, no question about it. It actually looks pretty nice too, and is a fun conversation piece for anybody, but especially for music lovers. Speaking of an audible watch, we have to then look at our next tier with the Vulcane Cricket. This is a piece that's commonly associated as a president's watch because it was worn by many US presidents, including LBJ, which apparently he gifted this watch to 200 people over the years, so he was a huge fan of it. Being worn by presidents since 1947 and many different presidents since. This brand was revitalized and now has a proprietary movement on the inside, alarm function, a brand that was responsible for really being the first mass-produced alarm watch. Yes, there were other attempts at trying to perfect the alarm watch, but this was really the one that first caught the stride to popularize this idea. Dual barrel design, one for the alarm, one for timekeeping. And nowadays in this price range, there's really not many mechanical alarm watches out there. You did have the Tudor Advisor, but that has now been discontinued, and quite frankly, didn't look as nice as the Vulcane Cricket, and also doesn't have the history of the Vulcane Cricket. And to round out this category, we have the UN Freak at the top. This was a video that didn't get as many views, but I just wanted to cover this watch because I think it is so unique for what it does. When this watch was originally unveiled in 2001, it was a trailblazer for both its use of material of silicon and then also just starting to change the landscape and thought process around what independent watchmaking should be. You saw the Harry Winston Opus series starting around this time. This was really the beginning of that evolution of what we're seeing now with different independent brands, more daring designs, pushing things forward. This watch is absolutely nuts. You have the gear train and the balance on the hands, rotating on a carousel, which can be moved by the bezel, which first needs to have a lifted tab that will allow you to rotate that bezel. This is probably the most accurate description that you can give of this watch. It is an absolute freak. Now we transition into GMT watches. And now last year we saw the release of a lot of true GMT watches in general in the sub $1,000 price range. I would say the mechanical GMT market now is as good as it's ever been and the most competitive it's ever been. So the watch I want to mention here is the Laurier Hydra GMT. This is a watch that I think represents this changing of the guard that's happening, because with the new release of the Miyota 9075 and then also with Seiko with their own GMT movements now becoming available to third parties, you're starting to see watches with GMT movements, mechanical GMT movements in crazy price tiers. This is a good representation because this is available at $600. Miyota 9 series movement, true GMT, 4 Hertz in its operation frequency, isolated hour hand at that second position, 200 meters of water resistance, 41 millimeter case, 46 millimeter lug to lug. But to get a watch with this movement at this price is something that I couldn't even imagine 5 years ago. This is just crazy to think about. And this is just one representation of, I would say, many different ones to now consider that are using this Miyota caliber, and then also Seiko calibers, like a brand like Notice, who's doing a really good job in bringing things even under $500 with those movements. For the other GMT that deserves a shout, and I would maybe say this is the true winner in the GMT category this year, this is the Longines Zulu GMT 39mm. This watch was so crucial for just both enthusiasts, but really for Longines. This was a brand for a while that I would say that wasn't connecting with their products when it came to what enthusiasts want, but it's a brand with so much history that is just neglected and maybe not appreciated to the extent that it should be. This is where everything aligned, in my opinion. I would say it's the most important watch for enthusiasts produced by this brand in the last 5 years easily. I also was fortunate enough to visit Longines HQ this year and go through their museum and archive, and it just reinforced a lot of just ideas and thoughts about why this brand and why this watch is really important, both for the brand, but also should just be seen for what it is, really being a class-leading GMT with a brand with history to back it up. 1925, Longines Zulu time comes out. Dual time zone. That's a quarter century before the Rolex GMT Master 2 comes out. In 1908, two-hand time zone pocket watch available in 1908. So they have some of the most impressive history when it comes to dual time zone aviation watches, and this comes together in a package that right around $3,000 on a bracelet, ceramic insert, true GMT movement on the inside, CUSC certified, very wearable dimensions. I think they just knocked it out of the park with this watch. And it's also, what I like about it too, is it responded to what so many enthusiasts wanted from the brand. This is, I think, one of the standouts and winners of the entire year, not only just for GMTs. And then finally, this is just a watch that I love. I think I mentioned it last year as an honorable mention, but I covered this watch in full detail this year because I just love this watch. This is the Parmigiani Tanda PF GMT Retropont. This is such a cool watch. I know it's not gonna be for everybody. I know it's expensive, and this is why it's in the stretch category here in the high price tier for the GMTs. But I've never seen a watch combine discreetness and understated ideas with a complication set that also is so functional, because usually there's a sacrifice that you have to make when you're trying to be discreet with function, but in this case, it actually works in its favor. You have 2 hour hands, and how one is adjusted is with the pusher on the lug that you can press, and that will advance one of the hour hands. One will be your local time, one will be then your home time. And when you're traveling, you can adjust that to get your local time and then always have your home time available. And then once you return back home, all you do, press the button on the crown and it snaps right back into position. You can't even see the hidden hour hand underneath. They both stack perfectly in unison. This is just such a cool watch. I can't get over this piece. I love it so much. Vaucher movement on the inside. They are a part owner of this manufacturer and producing some phenomenal movements. And also as a wearing experience, finishing on the dial, it's discreet, but so well done. Now for the everyday category, I would say a lot of the winners were more in the kind of luxury tier, but one that I have to mention under $1,000. This has now been a very familiar watch, but this was a big release for this brand this year when it came to now really rounding out what was missing from the collection. This is the Tissot PRX 35mm. When the PRX was launched in 2021, that was an absolute storm that I don't think any of us saw coming. This watch has become so important and a gateway for so many people into the collecting hobby that the one thing that was missing though was a smaller case size. 35mm might appear small, but it wears like a nice Datejust 36. It's a really solid case size for those that want that type of wearing experience with that integrated design. It wears like that, and this also directly emulates the C-Star model from the late 1970s in which these watches got their inspiration. Now you're essentially getting every Powermatic version at this case size, the different dials. So So I think this was just rounding out the collection. And if you're talking about one of the most important watches under $1,000 in the last 5 years, now getting this important new case size, I think it's an easy win for the PRX in this category. Now shifting up to the next tier, I would say the first one that I have to give a shout for is the Tudor Black Bay non-diving versions, now getting MT calibers on the inside. Very similar idea here, rounding out the collection. You saw the Tudor Ranger getting some MT calibers. You see what's happening with the Black Bay collection, continuing to transition into this idea. This was a collection that was using Etta Salita calibers for quite some time. So now to see the MT calibers on the inside, 70-hour power reserve, COSC certified, great update with the bracelet, more refined crown system, and getting the T-fit with the clasp. I think it checks off a lot of the boxes to make this pretty much a do anything type of watch for the price segment. And then also another watch that I'll mention right under $2,000 in very similar light, Longines updating their Conquest. I think this has just been a really strong year for Longines, and I think many people would agree with all these different models. This was another one that was very important. Only thing here is that you're only getting 41 millimeters and 34 millimeters, but fingers crossed that we'll see more in the future, but I do like the upgrades that they've made to the movement with the magnetic resistance. You're also still getting 100 meters of water resistance. The bracelet is far and away improved. The refinement on the dial itself makes it more versatile, but it also looks the part with those faceted indices. The crown system is much more wearable. Yes, you're not getting 300 meters of water resistance like the previous Conquests that were discontinued, but 100 meters for most people, I mean, it's absolutely adequate. And I prefer some of these other updates that just make it really a do everything type of everyday watch for $2,000. And then for the high tier, this is a pretty easy one for me. This is a watch that I personally own, maybe my most worn watch of the year. This is the Grand Seiko White Birch. This is the high beat version that we're looking at here with the 9S-A5. And that is the one thing I want to stress about this watch and why I think it's so special. It's not actually the dial, and the dial is spectacular. It's very eye-catching. You know, you see where the name comes from, but the movement is really what makes this watch unique and special. Last 100 years, when you're speaking of watch escapements in scaled production, you're not looking at many truly new examples of execution. You have the coaxial escapement, but another one you have to mention is this with this dual impulse escapement. I have a whole video about this if you'd like to dive into it a little bit more, but this watch fascinates me both on the front, on the back. It's a great versatile wear throughout the year that I just came back to time and time again. Love this watch, love what it represents, and one of Grand Seiko's finest in my opinion. Now we shift into the dive watch category. One of my favorites this year had to be the Certina DS Action Diver Titanium. When you're talking about titanium watches from Switzerland, usually we're talking about thousands of dollars. This one comes in right at $1,000. Solid bracelet, and from a brand that knows how to deliver a true professional dive watch. This is an ISO compliant dive watch, also getting their DS system. This is a system invented in 1959 where there's a security ring within the case. It allows the caliber to be encapsulated with a shock absorbing ring to help prevent adverse effects against timekeeping and impacts that can happen, well, if you're diving. Now I know most people don't do that, but nice to know it is there if you ever needed to worry about that. Also, the history of Certina I think is overlooked by many. You had Australian Navy divers using these. You saw the US government during their Tektite program, during those underwater habitat trials, also utilizing Certina. So cool history, great brand, and a watch that around $1,000, you could argue Certina is producing maybe the best dive watch for around $1,000, or at least in very small company. Now for this next tier, at the time of recording this video, the Longines Legend Diver just came out, so I'll mention that as an honorable mention. But the other one that really stole the show at Watches and Wonders and was one of the most talked about watches was the Tudor Black Bay 54. What I respect about this watch is no one was really asking for a smaller version of the Black Bay 58, but Tudor did it anyway. And it's the same thing that made them successful with the 58. They just decided to make a watch that they felt was probably a cool execution. And when I wore this for the first time, compared to where I was when I first heard about this piece, like I was a little bit on the fence. Like, is this gonna wear right? But I shouldn't have had that level of just questioning because it just wore so beautifully. I mean, it was a 37mm dive watch. That's very small, but they did such a great job with the proportions and really making this feel as if it was a watch pulled directly from the archives. It's like crazy. It feels like a vintage Submariner on the wrist. Even more than that of the 58 in my opinion. And then at the high end, I think there's two here that I'll mention. The Omega Planet Ocean 39.5mm from the 75th anniversary collection. I love the look of this dial with that ceramic and PVD treatment process that you're getting with that lined effect. Has this little just glisten to the dial as well. It's so stunning, and I love the size of 39.5mm for the Planet Ocean. I'd like to see more being done in that case size for the Planet Ocean. It's probably now become the most underrated of all the Seamasters by comparison. And then the other watch is the Rolex Submariner. This is the Starbucks version, the 126610LV. This is a model that, if you can get it at retail pricing, I mean, it's one of the best watches that you can get for the money, absolutely. 70-hour power reserve, 32-35 movement, Serrochrome bezel insert, 41mm case, wears larger than it did in the past, but still doesn't deviate too far from the DNA. It's not the same Submariner that you would think of years ago, but it is still a phenomenal watch for the money and cannot be dismissed as being one of the most important watches ever made in terms of its history and lineage. It now has evolved to cater more to the modern Rolex consumer, but still is an exceptional watch. Now we transition into chronographs, and the chronograph I'm going to mention here is going to be the speed timer as well as the Bulova Lunar Pilot. I think both of these deserve appreciation. For the sake of speed timer, I'm speaking more to the larger case size variant, the 41.5mm. Thing to consider here, 45.5mm lug to lug. So this is a watch that is going to wear very compact, like a true 40 on the wrist. I think a lot of people have gone to the 39mm case sizes, which are going to wear smaller, as in typical Seiko fashion. Don't overlook these models. I think these deserve a ton of appreciation. And the other model I have to mention here is the Bulova Lunar Pilot. This came out earlier this year. I almost forgot that it was released this year because it feels like so long ago. Nice to see it being scaled down to a smaller case size. For some, still probably not small enough, but you're also getting that white dial variant with that very fine texture on the dial, with that high precision movement on the inside. Nice sweep actually on both of these chronographs as well. So you're getting a little bit of best of both worlds. Of course, oscillation with kind of more of that mechanical look. Another brand that had a phenomenal year is TAG Heuer. I think they've made some great strides in the last 12 to 24 months. I have a whole video talking about that this year. But one of the standouts, the glass box Carrera, and then also the Skipper. This framework of the glass box, I think, is a winning formula. Why I liked it so much was it combined, and we know what old school Heuer represented with the Carreras. We've seen so many limited editions looking back to their archive and really just reinterpreting what was already done. This is a nice middle ground where you're seeing, yes, the reverence to the past, but it's also being informed by the future as well and where they want to go going forward. This is a new design, and it also has great dimensions, wears phenomenal on the wrist. And I think TAG in this price range, I think really delivered the best chronograph of the year, which is, I think, something that nobody saw coming, but they have the history to back it up and something that I think they can even delve into further going forward. More of this from TAG Heuer would be much appreciated, and I think they're doing a really good job as of late. And then on the high end, I'm going to mention the Vacheron Constantin Historique Corne de Vache 1955. This is a model that I have loved for quite some time. Finally was able to review it on the channel. Beautiful dimension set. I mean, you're talking about 38.5mm. Not many chronographs that are going to be even possible at that dimension set. 10.9mm in thickness, 47.4mm lug to lug. And most of that is going to come from those cow horn lugs, which are rather ornate, not going to be for everybody, but it creates this silhouette that is so classic Vacheron. This is one of their iconic designs. You think about the 1921, this is right there with it, as well as the 222. I think these are some historically the most important references from the brand. And there's a purity to this design, symmetry to this design that is just so hard to beat. Now we transition to dress watches, and the standout for me has to be the Tissot 1938. A lot of talk about the PRX this year, but this was one that I felt maybe didn't get as much appreciation as a result of so much of the talk and fervor going around the PRX. Loved what this watch represented, mostly because of the movement on the inside. This is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer for $800. So we no longer have the Ballade, that is no longer in the collection, and there's not many chronometer watches from Tissot available in this price segment. Now they have it available at $800. You see all these brands increasing prices, and that's just the reality of things. If you look at everything nowadays, everything is going up in price. But now you have an $800 Swiss chronometer watch. This is phenomenal value. Also, I think it looks the part too. Wearable case to go along with it. Thickness is pretty compact to slide underneath dress cuffs, 46.6mm lug to lug. Also did see a small seconds version that's going to be slightly above $1,000, but tremendous value here and something that probably slipped through the cracks for some compared to the success of other collections from this brand. Next, we have the Grand Seiko SBGW 231 for that next tier. I think this still remains one of the best points of value under $5,000 still to this day. Beautiful case dimensions informed by 1960s design and purity from those original Grand Seiko models. 9S64 movement on the inside, beautiful handset, this cream ivory dial with its curvature, it's very understated, beautiful symmetry, the GS logo and how it just creates that ornate, just emblematic symbol for the brand and has some more 3D to the dial itself with those faceted markers on the dial. It's just a beautiful watch. And with its no date, similar to that Vacheron, just the legibility, the ease of reading the time, it's just simply spectacular. And then also for our dress category, I was conflicted. Where should I put this? Dress, chronograph? I decided to put it in the dress category just because the Reverso, when I think of it, although it does have history as a sports watch, for me, this just would look so fascinating as a dress watch on somebody's wrist. This is the JLC Reverso Tribute Chronograph. One of my favorites from Watches and Wonders. It is a watch that wears slightly larger compared to some of the other Reversos, similar to a dual phase case that you're going to have here. But the thickness is actually very reasonable, 11.14 millimeters thick, and that's including the chassis and undercase. Integrated manual caliber, integrated chronograph caliber, I should add, JLC 860 movement, column wheel chronograph to go along with it. Two different looks that you can take when you have this watch on your wrist. It is a stunning watch, and it was a standout as I was walking throughout Watches and Wonders this year. One of my favorites from the entire show and one of my favorites for the entire year. So now we transition into the most controversial watches this year. The watches that got the most people talking, both positive and negative. It was just a polarizing conversation whenever these watches were brought up. Speaking of Watches and Wonders, one of the watches that was the talk of the show was the IWC Ingenieur. This watch really emulating that IWC Ingenieur SL Jumbo Genta design. This piece, when you put this on the wrist, and I can show some photos of this thing on my wrist, when I put this on for the first time, especially that aqua dial version, I was like, oh man, this is so well done. This is probably one of my favorite designed IWC pieces in maybe years. It's so good. But the reason why this watch is controversial is because of its price. Well over $10,000. It's a boutique only piece from my understanding. And I think many people, they were waiting for this watch and then to see the price and then just how good it is. I mean, when you put this on the wrist, if you have put this on the wrist, I'd like to see comments down below and what your thoughts are. It just feels so good. Even on my wrist, I was afraid that it might be too large, but it looks great in my opinion. And it's a watch that I liked a lot, but with its price, that just created a lot of tension. There's people that just could not accept this watch for what it is. And I think that's what made it hurt the most because it wasn't a well-executed watch. Now, will it still sell and do I still like it? Absolutely. But does it get people talking? That sure is correct as well. So last year we saw the Moon Swatch, and that was the most probably controversial watch release, most talked about watch release in quite some time, when Blancpain decided to do a collaboration with Swatch that also got a ton of people talking, both positive and negative. I see it for what it is. It's a watch that's intended to be just a fun, lighthearted idea and a watch that you can wear. And this is a way better watch than the Moon Swatch in my opinion. It feels like a proper watch, but so many people are not gonna like the System 51 movement. They're also going to look at Blancpain as maybe not the same equivalent as Omega and its affiliation and not being as much of a mass market brand. But then you could argue that that is also why Blancpain should do it, is they need to be seen and be known by a whole new generation of enthusiasts. So there's a lot of conversation about this piece, and I think these Swatch collaborations just are always going to have some baggage associated with them, just given what we've seen over the last 18 months with how this is all unfolded. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I do think Swatch should probably keep doing this because it does get people talking. And when people are talking about you, both either good or bad, or they have a variety of opinions, they're still talking about you. Another watch that got people talking this year was the Tissot PRX Digital. This was a watch that I was surprised at the amount of people that really pushed back on it. The PRX in general has become one of the most important watches under $1,000, in the last decade, really, even though it's only been out for a couple of years. And when you have that level of enthusiasm, and when Tissot was really pushing to try some different things, which I applaud them for doing, I think it's a good idea to not always just rest on your laurels and push things forward. I think many people, when they look at a digital watch nowadays, they just associate affordable Casio watches, but there's a whole spectrum of different digital watches out there. I mean, Tissot has been making digital watches since the early 1970s, But if the PRX is what it is and it's developed its reputation on being this mechanical watch and being this great value in the mechanical sphere, as we saw, as you transition to digital, there are going to be some people that just are not going to overlap. And I find, and what I'm learning more and more, is that there's a lot of people that just don't like digital watches altogether. And if you try to infringe on Casio's territory at all, people get very riled up. So this was just this combination of a couple of these ideas. If you've handled the PRX Digital, you'll know that this is by far and away, a way better finished watch than any of those affordable digital watches. But no question, this is a watch that got people talking this year. And as I mentioned earlier, conversation can be a very good thing, even if it's not always all positive. And then for the final watch here, we have the Rolex Puzzles. This is a day-date model that has emojis on it, and I'll say this first. The Celebration model has actually grown on me. I was classifying the Celebration model with this model together when I first saw them, but I don't think that's fair because I think the Celebration, both on its price and just how that dial looks, I think it does have its own lane. And would I part my own money with it? No, but I think it's a pretty cool watch, and it shows Rolex is reflecting and seeing who their modern buyers are and are adapting accordingly. But if you would have told me 10 years ago Rolex was going to release a watch with emojis on it, I would have suggested psychiatric help for you. But honestly, you would be right, because that's exactly what we got this year. Are there people that will collect this watch and want this watch? Absolutely. There is a market for this piece. It doesn't mean to say that it's not going to create some controversy and get people talking. And do I think it's personally not the best looking watch? Yeah, I'd probably say so. It's very out there, but I understand why Rolex did it, and it got people talking about the brand even further, and that's something that they have no issue with getting people to do, because they do it all the time. But now to round out, we have some of my favorite watches of the year. This is more just my personal taste. It's not based on what I think would be good for other people. It's really just what I liked a lot. First one is the Oris Big Crown Pointer Date Hank Aaron. This is a watch that I just adore. I bought it immediately. And this was one of the first watches ever where I heard about the rumblings of this coming, and I couldn't even wait for the watch to become available to the public. I tried to get it beforehand. I'm like, hey, I won't show anybody. I just want this watch. The reason being, I was a huge sports fan, huge baseball fan growing up. That was really my first love. I had a Hank Aaron framed poster and just mural on my wall. It was first thing I looked at when I got out of the bed as a kid every single morning. So to get a Hank Aaron collaboration with a watch is just infusing two ideas that I just love, two passions of mine. So that was a watch that I added to my collection very quickly. Love that piece. I was a big fan of the Roberto Clemente model, but this was even closer to home for me, and now is a part of my collection. Next, we have the Longines Zulu Time 39. Such an important piece for the brand. I love the looks, I love the size. It's a great piece for me, and I think it also represents an important part of Longines history, which I think they just need to be more vocal about. Then you have the Seiko Metronome next. This was, even for $200, this watch made me smile, and it made me smile more than a lot of watches that are exponentially more in price. Nothing more needs to be said. Volcane Cricket. This was also a model that I really did enjoy. I think many watches that have these funky executions for complication types sometimes forego just looking clean, presentable, simple. This has this classic element infused with history as well as beautiful design, and was a standout for me this year. Another watch that I have talked about quite a bit, Parmigiani Tonda PF Retropont GMT. I love this watch. I don't think I need to state any more about why I love this watch. It is just a beautiful watch, understated nature, but very functional. Then the Omega Planet Ocean 39.5 millimeters. I love a Planet Ocean, especially at 39.5 millimeters in this blue dial. Probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite, from the 75th anniversary collection. White Birch, obvious that is going to be one of the watches that I'm going to have to choose here. As a watch I wore during my wedding, now has a lot of sentimental value to me, and I love the engineering on display and the dial finishing. It's just a remarkable watch and a beautiful one to look at every single day. Another watch, one of my favorite videos for the entire year was visiting Max Busser and MB&F, and one of the watches there that, I mean, just so beautiful, and being able to see all their watches in person. Some of them are very crazy, they're horological machines, but their LM Legacy Machine 101 is just a perfect combination of Max's approach and philosophy to watchmaking and paying reverence to traditional watchmaking or more conventional watchmaking. It takes his love of pushing the envelope and then also creating it in a watch that does wear more like a watch than what you would see with their horological machines. Just nothing else like it in the entire industry. Then you have the Certina DS Action Diver Titanium. Again, I think Certina is doing some really cool stuff. I put this on for the first time and I was really impressed. I also love the fact that it's at 38 millimeters. Not many dive watches with that case size, titanium, Swiss made. it's in a really unique lane, and I don't think there's a lot of competition for a titanium Swiss-made dive watch of ISO compliance at that price range. And then one final watch is a watch I recently reviewed. This is the Zenith A384 Revival model. I'm wearing an A386, which is a watch in my personal collection I wear quite frequently as well. It's probably one of my most worn pieces this year. But the A384, nothing else like it. It has this hybridized to no rectangular case shape that is unparalleled in terms of finding another watch that looks the type. El Primero movement on the inside, very legible as well, and just a piece that for myself, it just really speaks to me. Sometimes it doesn't always have to be this rational idea of why a watch connects with you, and this is one that certainly does. But all right guys, that is my video here today recapping 2023, some of the top watches of the year. If you enjoyed the video and you want us to keep doing this every single year, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really do appreciate all of the support throughout the year thus far, and looking forward to what's around the corner for 2024. What was your favorite watch release of the year, both in general of what was new, but also a watch that maybe you'd never had on your wrist or never held in person, and you had the opportunity to hold it this year for the first time, and it made a lasting impression? Leave a comment down below. Also, be sure to check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. How we're able to fund all of our productions is through selling watches on our site. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business because it allows us to keep doing what we're doing. We love what we do here. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.